Hey everyone, it's the Kung Fu Genius, aka Alex Richter, and we have a new deal for Kung Fu Genius fans. If you go to citywt.com, you can buy any 2 of our apparel and get 1 free, and that includes the new City Wing Chun gym shirt like the one I'm wearing in the new color. Any apparel, you buy 2, you get 1 free. Just go to citywt.com and use the code KFGB2G1. That's KFGB2G1. Use that code at CityWT to get 1 free apparel with your purchase of 2 of anything, t-shirts, all that good stuff. And before we get started, if you could do me a favor and don't forget to like this video, comment on it, share it on social media, help us get the word out there. That's a tremendous help. And if you listen to us on audio, don't forget to review the podcast wherever you listen to it. And with that, let's get started.
All right, peeps. On today's episode of the Kung Fu Genius, the genius will be taking viewer questions and cause a ruckus. Lots of gems, lots of Podunk, Arkansas, and lots of "Have you learned about Cham Sao?" Let's get to it.
He is unstoppable, unbeatable, unbelievable. He's Alex Richter, the Kung Fu Genius.
And every day, I practice martial arts. Watch out!
Word is, I'm a Kung Fu genius. Practiced all day like a genius.
Yo, Dre, how you doing, man?
Ooh, I'm doing good.
Yeah, another
I'm
episode,
doing good.
and this is our 20th episode of the Kung Fu Genius.
So we made it.
I never thought we'd make it this far, and to think the response. Do you know how much YouTube revenue we're earning these days?
Ooh.
Like tens of dollars.
That much.
Tens of
That
dollars.
was the goal.
Yes, I think the last Ask Me Anything video before I left today, $1.31. That's what we had earned on that one. Yeah, so we are definitely YouTubers now, making that hardcore YouTube money.
Yeah,
right?
it's making that Skrilla.
Yeah, so
For
you know
Shilla.
what I've learned from the first 19 episodes is that people really like it when we do these more Ask Me Anything formats because, one, like we discussed, they can hear themselves a little bit, like hear their name on the show. And also it gives me the chance to talk about a wide variety of topics in one show. Whereas, I could talk about ninjas for 3 hours, but whether people want to sit and listen to me talk about ninjas for 3 hours is another thing, right? So I think moving forward, unless we're going to do an interview with someone, we'll probably stick to this format. So
We got to give the people what they want.
we got to give the people what they want, right? I see the numbers on the different episodes, right? And so a couple interviews, like if it's about Bruce Lee, we got John Little. People really like that stuff. And other than that, people like to have me talk about lots of different things. And I also like the interaction. And I also like kind of not knowing what you pulled and what you're going to ask me. So I think we're going to stick to this format unless there's something super special that we decide to talk about. And so as a result, for all of these episodes, we really need everyone who's watching, especially on YouTube, to comment below on the types of things, ask me a question. I can't promise I'm going to get to. We had so many questions on the last video.
Yeah.
For the next one, for this one, I'm only getting to a small percentage of them, but we just need to keep them coming.
Keep them
coming. That way we always have constant stuff to talk about. And it's pretty much how we're going to do it, I
when
think.
you say ask me anything,
Yes.
what do you mean by that?
Well, it should be Kung Fu related, all right? Don't ask me anything about, I don't know, space or these UFOs they find out, exist now, or
We want to clarify
or
that.
Pringles or how Pringles are made or anything like that. Don't ask me any of that stuff, all right?
Yeah.
There are other people like Mikey Deane who's far more qualified for that kind of stuff.
That crapola.
So,
All right.
So anyway, so these questions we got are all from YouTube.
That's cool.
Right.
All right. So
I
I don't
guess-
got to say from blah, blah, blah. or
No.
from blah, blah.
We made it easy for you. See,
Ooh,
one thing I've realized, if I want this show to flow, I got to make what you do really simple. Super easy.
If you want to
Cue
make
cards.
it flow, otherwise it's bumpy.
I realize, I gotta treat you a little way like directors have to treat Steven Seagal, right? You have 5 words you got to memorize.
Yeah.
You're not going to memorize it.
No.
I need to put those 5 words on cue cards so you can read them.
I got you.
So,
Under
yeah.
Siege, I was watching last night.
Sorry to hear that.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah, it would have been better if you'd been watching Marked for Death, to be honest.
Would have been even better if it was hard to kill.
Hard to kill. That's the one with the Jamaican.
No, that's Marked for Death.
Marked for Death is Jamaicans.
Yes.
Oh, I love that one. All right, let's go to it. We got, first off, the bat straight out, what is it, South Carolina? SC?
No, I think he's just SC.
Okay.
Don't infer anything. These are people's YouTube handles. Sometimes they're the names. I just put, we just have what the YouTube handle is there, right?
My bad,
Yeah,
Sifu.
SC.
SC. When do you call a Chinese martial arts movie wuxia?
Wuxia.
Wuxia. And when do you call it a kung fu movie?
Yeah. Mikey Deane, we really gonna have to get you to get like some cue cards for him to read, right?
But I would have read it the same. Wuxia.
But big, no, you have to write them out phonetically. So wuxia would be like WOOSHIA, wuxia.
Wuxia.
You don't get one of those speak and spells or whatever, the
Woo.
things you just like
Shia.
combine and just shake it and then show it.
So the question is,
Shake it.
when do you call a Chinese martial arts movie wuxia, and when do you call it a kung fu movie? So
I think that's some Mandarin craziness, right? That wuxia.
yeah, wuxia's made. You could tell, right? Whenever you see the X's or the ZH's, or people have cotton balls in their mouth, that's usually Mandarin, all right?
Got it.
Especially the Beijing variants, right? Very different sounding to Cantonese. So, well, I'm not necessarily the expert on this because there are kung fu movie experts out there that get really pissy when you tiptoe into their little walled garden of expertise, because obviously I'm a kung fu guy and I like Hong Kong films and I like kung fu movies. So I know a little bit about this stuff, but there are people out there who are like their whole life is Hong Kong
That's
films
all
and
they
kung
know.
fu movies, right?
Yeah.
Oddly enough, most of those people usually don't actually do martial arts, which I find super strange, right?
One of my cousins I met over the weekend.
Yeah.
Is one of those dudes.
Yeah.
And
They
I
know
tried to
everything.
get him. I'm like, yo, check out our podcast, blah blah blah. He's like, man, I ain't into that. I'm just into the movies. And you way deep in it. You way deep. I'm like,
Crazy,
He
huh?
just wants movies. That's
Yeah,
it.
it's crazy, right?
Yeah.
So, like, on Twitter, there's like a lot of people there, like they're really into Hong Kong films, and they can break down like the different, like, the Japanese release had 2 or 3 scenes that the Hong Kong release didn't have, and the subtitles were different on this, and then this print is in a different color qualities. Like, I'm not the guy to ask any of that stuff, right? I've seen kung fu movies, and I go yay or nay, all right?
way deep.
And I like the actors, right?
way deep.
And so I'm always a little cautious because, there are people out there that, like, as much as I know about Wing Chun and Kung Fu, they know that much about Hong Kong films. So whenever I tiptoe into their little walled garden, I'm like, oh, you're going to get all these
Little walled
people,
garden.
like, Mike Leader and all these guys get all upset when anyone tries to kind of encroach on, their little protective circle over there, right? And so wuxia in Cantonese actually mo hap. Mo hap literally means like martial chivalry, or it can mean a martial hero. In fact, the magazine New Martial Hero, the one of which Grandmaster Yip Man had an interview back in the day, is called Sun Mo Hap, which is new. Sun means new. Sun Mo Hap, right?
Okay.
And so Mo Hap is a term that literally means martial chivalry. It can mean a hero. And it's a kind of a genre of films, but also from what I understand, of course I could be wrong on this, those originated as novels. And they're generally a little more skewed towards fantasy. And they're usually in ancient or maybe like a pre-modern China. So when you think of films like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, that is a modern wuxia type film. I don't know if it has to be a sword film, like a game, like a straight sword film to be considered wuxia, but normally like movies like Hero, those films that are like in the old times.
Gotcha.
It usually has a main hero character, and there's usually some kind of fantastical elements, and usually there's a lot of wires and flying, right?
A lot of wire, okay.
But the problem is that's also, Hong Kong filmmakers are always looking for new ideas. So throughout the years, they've taken some wuxia ideas and applied them into more modern kung fu stuff. So
Matrix is wuxia?
yeah, I
Wuxia?
mean, so it's kind of like it's kind of like something like that, right? Or is Wong Kar-wai's Grandmaster, can that be considered a wuxia because of the style, or does it not have enough fantastic elements for it to actually be a wuxia. So the problem is I don't really know.
Kung Fu Hustle.
I taught. It has elements in there, but I think it's set in too modern of a time for it to really be considered a
Makes sense,
mohapin, right? But it could be, all right? And again, if there's someone out there who actually knows the distinction better, I think that really it's those older fantasy-style movies.
Rumble in the Bronx ain't one of those.
No, that's definitely a modern action movie, right? 36 Chambers, definitely a kung fu movie, right? So it's difficult. Like, I don't know. I'm sure there's someone out there who probably has like a very pedantic way of breaking it down.
If you dare, chime in.
But I'm definitely not the guy to say exactly. And also, like I said, the problem is that they blurred a lot of the lines. A lot of things that you were typically only having a wuxia or mohap film. They've used those in modern films as well, and they've kind of blended it. So I don't think that distinction is as deliberate or as easy to tell as it used to be in the old days.
Gotcha. All right. So, my man, Pretty Fly for a Filipino guy is back. What mistake have you made in teaching Wing Chun that you'd say that you have learned from the most?
Wow, that's a really great question. I made lots of mistakes teaching Wing Chun over the years. I think, I've been doing this for a long time. That means...
I like how he says just one mistake. Like, it's only one.
Yeah, well, I mean, what mistake as if there's only one, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to phrase it as like maybe what's the biggest mistake that I made, right? Because,
this is a really good question.
You make lots of mistakes when you run your own school. Mistakes from, business decisions, putting certain people in charge maybe that you shouldn't, having you run stuff up front, right? Have you be the face of City Wing Chun.
Oh, yeah. Big mistake.
A face for radio.
That's right. He's got a face for radio and a voice for television.
Woo! Love it.
And so
guys,
I would
man.
probably say in the early years, because I was so worried about like Sifu Langting being essentially pleasing him whenever he would come and teach seminars. I wanted him to come and I wanted him to see that all of my students were like super high level and they all knew their programs and they were all like really super hardcore and super dedicated, right? And then of course that type of stress compounded like into so many different aspects. One, I would put a lot of stress on the students, right?
Okay.
And that was not fair to them.
So I shouldn't do that when I open my own branch.
No, because it doesn't. See, it's kind of difficult to answer this like easily or quickly and do it any justice. A quick answer would be, maybe I was too hard on some of my early period students. That would be the quick answer, right? Everyone who came in the door, I wanted to make sure they had perfect form, perfect cheese held, perfect fighting. They knew everything and they were perfect. Like they had to represent what I considered like the highest level of excellence in the product of Wing Chun that I'm really teaching, right? Dope. But the problem is that people come to a martial arts school for all sorts of different reasons, all right? The one person really wants to learn the style and wants to learn it in detail. The other person, they have a job that they hate and they just want something to do at the end of the 8-hour day. They want to be transported into like another place, right? And that's why we make the school look like a little piece of Hong Kong. So when people are here, they kind of forget their work day, the stuff that's outside.
That's why
I'm really big about keeping those bamboo curtains closed. Because when the bamboo curtains are open, like even on the windows, when they're open, what do you see? Because we're on the 4th floor. You see buildings, you see the city. And that's what you see all the time when you're in the city. So when you close it, you're like in a space where you're kind of somewhere else. That's why I like that look, right? And so I realized a lot of my students come to me for that. Some people come because they just want to do it because it's fun. Other people came because they saw the IP Man films, right?
Yeah.
So
love the IP.
The problem is, and this is something that Krishnamurti always talked about, like the teacher imposes their burden on the students. And it's not fair. Because, sometimes people go like, oh, well, if you teach a big school or you have lots of students, you can't keep the same level of quality as if the school is small. And what I've realized is, first of all, that's not true.
Okay.
There are plenty of schools that have lots of students that still have a high level of quality. The difference is, no matter how good you are at teaching something, in all honesty, about 10% of your student base, those are your more hardcore types. Okay?
I remember you telling me this.
And
yeah.
of those 10%, all right, about half of those will probably be instructors or people who lead on to the future.
Yeah.
The difference is when you have a small school because you're so hardcore, I can't teach a big group because I'm so hardcore that would water everything down. Well, what those people don't realize is, let's say I have 100 students, okay? 10% of them are pretty hardcore, and about half of those will be instructors. So I'll have 5 instructors, another 5 hardcore people, and the rest of the people are there for fun, of varying levels of quality or hardcoreness, right?
Okay.
When your school is small, you only attract those 10% at first, because since you don't have a name, those people seek you out. When I started, I didn't even have a commercial school. So who came to my school? People who really wanted to learn Wing Chun. Those are your the super motivated people. Yeah. Those are easy to teach. And that's why the people like, I only teach a small group because my methods are too hardcore to teach en masse, all right? And then I could have thought the same way when I first started teaching and I only had 10 students, because those 10 sought me out because they specifically wanted to learn Leung Ting Wing Chun, and they were quote unquote more hardcore. Right? So, and I mean, of course, even within my first few students, you had a couple people who are not super hardcore, right? Like my very 2 first students. But for the most part, if you were there for like the first 6 months, you would look at the students and it would be maybe 80% of them were like really hardcore into it. All right? But what you realize is like, let's say at some point, it's like you have 5 really hardcore students, and then you increase your base, you double your base. Now you have 8 super hardcore students. And then you double your base again. Now you have maybe 15 hardcore students.
Right.
Okay? But here's the thing. Those 15 hardcore students, of which a percentage of those will become instructors, those are the people who are going to open schools and continue on your legacy.
Yeah.
The other, let's say 80% of your students, they're there because they enjoy it. So let them enjoy it. They're not worried about being the best fighter. They're not worried about being the successor to Wing Chun. They're not worried about any of those things.
Just want
but they love it.
Something.
They get great value out of it. They love coming to training. They get a lot out of it. And so to say like, no, you have to be so good that you could potentially take over for me if I croak tomorrow. Why would you put that type of burden on brand new people who are just there? Hey man, I'm just here because I hate my boss. All right? Why? And you're like, no, but your bong house sucks so bad. If you don't fix it, I'm not going to want to teach you. Why would you do that?
So if you see potential in someone, you just can't put that burden on them. Even though you see that potential
you have to let them really. I mean, of course, you're always going to support people. You're always going to try to push people to be better than let them see what they're capable of. But you're only going to have a handful of super hardcore students and a smaller handful of people who could potentially carry on your legacy, right? And the difference is when you have a huge school, you have a handful of those students. When you have a very small school, most of your students are from that group. That's the only difference. So the people with the small schools who think they're super hardcore, no, you're just limiting the number of people you teach because of your ego, because you're afraid of having students that, maybe they're not really good at punching and kicking, or maybe they're not really good at fighting. So you think they make you look bad. So the reason they don't want to teach more people is because if everyone can't be good, it's their own ego that won't allow them to do it. Even though the people who come who are not particularly, let's say for lack of a better way of describing it, good at Wing Chun. Just say they're not good at Wing Chun. But that doesn't mean that their enjoyment is any less than the person who's super good at it. And so when I was a beginner instructor, I didn't understand that. I thought everyone in my school had to be hardcore and everyone had to be super dedicated. And what you realize is your school will keep growing, but the number of super hardcore dedicated people won't change much. You got 5, then you got 10, then you got 15 as your school continues to grow. But that's okay. If the difference is the small martial arts school that only wants to teach 4 people because they're so hardcore. Well, the one guy leaves, one dude croaks, and the other 2 have no desire to keep teaching. So when that Sifu is old, he's got nothing left.
It's not just that, if he even makes it that long.
If he even makes it that long, right? But me, okay, I have maybe 15 super hardcore instructors, all right?
Yeah.
And maybe that's not the biggest percentage of all of my students, but I got 15.
Yeah.
Okay? I don't have one. It's not resting on one person to not croak or lose interest or find another hobby. All right? And so the mistake I made is I thought everyone had to be just like me. And that's not it.
That's not happening. All right, realistically speaking. Dude, that is a great question. Thank you, Pretty Fly, for a Filipino guy.
He always has great questions.
Yeah. All right, so next up, we got Billy Lowe.
Billy Lowe from Game of Death?
Yeah.
Wow.
Who knew? Who knew he was chiming in?
Yeah.
Love Billy. All right. How long does it take for you to, Todd, learn the bat cham sao?
Well, it's kind of embarrassing. And I really hate to admit this in a
You haven't learned the
public
bat cham
podcast.
sao.
I've not learned the bat cham sao.
All right, we got next up. We got Dennis Davidov or Davidov. My bad if I pronounced it way off. All right, is the grappling component something that Sifu Leung Ting specifically emphasized to make things more practical, or was it taught generally by Yip Man as well and just not as emphasized by some of his other students?
Yeah, so this was a much longer question, but we just clipped the last part. So he basically asked, because in some of the WT demos, you see Wing Chun instructors doing some trips and throws and maybe some basic arm locks and stuff. And the idea is that, well, is this something specifically from Leung Ting? Because you don't really see it that much in the other Wing Chun styles. So the funny thing is actually this is something that Sifu Leung Ting addressed himself, I believe, in his Buji book. And he talks about that he often gets accused of having added these elements into Wing Chun, like especially like things like the double grappling hand, the cham sao, the locks, and some of the sweeps and stuff. And so what I can say is I've looked at a lot of the other Wing Chun stuff out there under the Yip Man banner, right?
Right.
And there are other exponents of the Yip Man Wing Chun lineage that also do sweeps and trips. So, first of all, Leung Ting is not the only one within the greater Yip Man family that, if you will grab someone's head and throw them to the floor with a cow gurt with a circling leg. I mean, we have this circling foot in the Buji form, and then it's all over the place in the wooden dummy when you circle to get behind the leg, right? So, I don't think it's a stretch to say, well, I don't, it's the sweep and the trip is certainly not something specific to Leung Ting, right? In terms of like the locks and those kind of things, you also see some basic, standing arm locks in the other Wing Chun lines as well.
Okay.
The difference is, I would say, between like a WT and let's say some of the other styles, not the other Wing Chun styles, just the other styles in general that try to lock is, we never go for a lock. All right, because if I'm trying to go for a lock, I'm kind of chasing your hands.
Yeah.
And if I'm chasing your hands, then I'm a candidate for getting punched in the face, right? What we do is there's certain moments when you're kind of positioning yourself in a way that you have their arm, you're controlling them, and it's there. So instead of punching the person, I can crank their arm to bring them down, and usually we don't lock people to make them tap. We use it as what I call a positional control.
Okay.
So you have someone who's really punching you, you cover up, you take them to the side, and you use what we call ganjat, where you use a combination of the high gansao and the jatsao to turn them, which looks like a straight arm lock, but I do it to turn them so I can get in a better position to strike. So we use it as momentary positional controls to turn the person where their second hand is away from us so we can go back to striking. There are some applications with Sifu Leung Ting did develop, which is what he taught to the police and stuff like that, which are a little bit more for restraining.
Oh, right.
But that's like a separate program. But within like the more classical Wing Chun, these things are part and parcel to how you do it. I mean, if you look at the double grappling hand, the double cham sao, you have it in both the Buji form and you have it in the wooden dummy form. And so anytime you put two hands on one, which is the big question, because normally Wing Chun we say, yep, one controls two. One hand controls two hands. So anytime you try to lock someone's arm, you're kind of doing the opposite. You have two hands on one. And that's dangerous because that means both of your hands are occupied holding onto one arm and your opponent has a free arm, which means they can punch you in the face. when we use it, we only do it in situations when that back arm is not in a position to hit us, which means we also use it with footwork moving to the outside away from the punching arm. So there are a lot of caveats and rules you need to learn to apply them successfully, but I do not believe that Leung Ting per se developed these things. I cannot discuss with any intelligence what the other students learned or didn't learn. That's all speculation. But I don't believe that stuff is specifically Leung Ting's creation. You do even see it in other Wing Chun styles as well. So, and even in the Leung Ting gym, their photos in 1969, I believe it was in November or December, Sifu Leung Ting gave a demonstration at the Baptist University. He was the first Hong Kong instructor to teach a Kung Fu class openly at a university, because Kung Fu had kind of a bad reputation in Hong Kong, among the normies who didn't do Kung Fu, especially in the 50s and 60s. It was generally regarded, not by people who did Kung Fu, but by people who didn't, which is a majority of people in Hong Kong, that this was something only that triads or thugs or gangsters did, right? Because a lot of the Kung Fu schools were also somewhat linked to organized crime, or Hak Se Wui, the triads and stuff like that. Some Kung Fu styles more notorious than others. Dai Sing Pekwa, I believe, had a very deep triad influence. So did Pak Mei, White Eyebrow. So there were some styles and some specific schools of those styles that had a little bit of that influence. So they all got kind of branded with that reputation. So it wasn't normal that like a university would allow there to be an extracurricular Kung Fu class there. And Leung Ting was the first one to basically pull that off. And he had a big demonstration, and Grandmaster Yip Man was the guest of honor. And there are lots of photos there.
Is that the photo that I know of?
Yeah, and there are a lot of photos
kick?
from there, right?
Yeah.
Grandmaster Yip Man was sitting there. Tang Sang, his other student, was next to him. There were a bunch of kind of heavies of that time of the Chinese martial arts circle, other Wing Chun Sifu there. And which is always funny with these people always say, oh, Leung Ting didn't even know Yip Man. Yeah, that's why he came. Literally, the funny thing is this Grandmaster Yip Man sitting there at this demonstration that Leung Ting gave, and he's sitting there as the guest of honor, and right underneath it is a banner that says Leung Ting's Martial Arts School, right? And it says it in Chinese, and meanwhile, people
he just randomly
Leung Ting didn't even know Yip Man, and he's like,
there.
he's literally sitting above a banner that Yip Man is sitting above a banner that says Leung Ting's Martial Arts School, right? So yeah, cool story, bro.
Yeah.
He really didn't know him at all, right?
Didn't know him at all.
And so there are a lot of photos from that demonstration. And they had like obviously some kind of pre-planned demos, but they also had like some free fighting demos and things like that, chi sao sparring, things like that. And I've seen a number of the photos from there, and you see the neck pulling hands, where which is typical from the wooden dummy chi sao. Students performing the neck pulling hand in front of Grandmaster Yip Man. Other students sweeping other people down in front of Grandmaster Yip Man. Knowing how Sifu Leung Ting is also like very worried about, he doesn't want to do anything.
About? Okay.
Like what we just talked about, right? I don't think he would openly have his students performing movements that were not part of Wing Chun in front of the old man. Yeah. So if you had students doing the neck pulling hand and doing sweeps and trips while the old man is sitting there above a banner with your name on it, they probably wouldn't be doing Chinese wrestling techniques if you're a Wing Chun guy, right? So that's why I go, well, there's photos of Grandmaster Yip Man literally watching these type of techniques being performed by Leung Ting students.
They had him into
and also there were some fighting contests in the 60s and 70s where you see Sifu Leung Ting students like on top of the other person, like doing what you now call ground and pound, having like knee on belly. Most famously, Leung Ting's brother having a very contentious fight with a Choi Lei Fut master. Leung Ting's brother also being a triad. And like where he's basically kind of knee on belly and pounding him down in a full contact ring fight in the 1970s. All right. So way before UFC, 20 years before UFC, the Wing Chun guys were on the ground holding someone down and punching them, right? So, and this is still within the span of the time that Grandmaster Yip Man was around. So for those reasons, I don't really think that these are Leung Ting creations. And here's the thing. Let's say they were. Well, look at where martial arts has gone today, all right? Mixed martial arts has grappling, has sweeps, has trips and throwing. And so if Sifu Leung Ting felt in the 60s
Yeah,
that
pioneer.
Learning was that Wing Chun was lacking this, and he put it, well, why is that a big diss in Chinese Kung Fu? Chinese martial arts are the only martial arts family in the world where it's a bad thing to improve things or upgrade things. Every other martial art under the sun improves things generation to generation. And when you listen to the history of Chinese martial arts styles, so-and-so fused these two styles because he felt such and such was inadequate, so by fusing them created a new super style. But once the founder, it's like the founder was very liberal in their idea of creating something new. They were actually the rebels. The founder, here's the thing, the founder of every Chinese Kung Fu style had to have, in some way or another, given his or her Sifu the middle finger. Because if everyone only followed tradition, there would be no new Chinese martial arts style. Because at some point, Wing Chun, let's say, wasn't created out of nowhere. Whoever developed Wing Chun developed it with some knowledge and understanding of and some previous martial arts experience. They maybe felt that certain things didn't work as well, or maybe certain things were too cumbersome or took too long. So they took this out, put this in, changed this, and refined it, created a new system. That is extremely progressive.
Okay.
The founders were very progressive and very forward thinking. But the moment they created it, but now you can't change it. Okay? And now everyone has a claim that generation to generation, they're passing along this torch of a museum piece that has somehow been unaltered. But the truth is that if our founders were that stupid, we would not even have Wing Chun, right? So the idea that Wing Chun cannot be adapted, so the thing is, people ask me like, oh, did Learning add the grappling move? Like, first of all, it's not grappling. Let's say arm locking movements or like, pinning someone on the ground and punching them. And I go, well, I don't think he did, because there's evidence to suggest this stuff was going on in the 60s when the old man was still around.
Okay.
But even if he did, BFD, okay?
BFD?
Big deal, all right? Okay? That just means he came up with something that everyone else is like, well, I'm not going to do. It's not true. Sometimes you're fighting, and the best thing to do is you throw someone. Now, again, just like the arm locks, we don't search for them because that's hand chasing. If it's there, you take it. If it's not there, you go back to punching.
You take it.
If someone is overextended themselves on their front leg and your leg is there and you can sweep them, you take it.
Sweep.
If you try to go for a sweep and they smell it coming, it's going to be foiled, right? That's the problem, is when these things are applied poorly, they look really bad. But how do you not apply something poorly? You learn how to do it correctly and then you practice, okay? So maybe some people didn't learn it or didn't practice it, or they didn't do it. And what do Wing Chun people say when they're not good at something or don't do something? Oh, it's not traditional. We don't do that in Wing Chun. All right? Okay. Good for you. All right? Good question.
Good question. There's a lot of good questions today. All right, let's go into the next one. Wing Chun and Application is asking...
Great YouTube handle.
Yeah. What percentage of students in your area get into and maintain athletic conditioning versus those who don't?
Can I answer that first?
Yeah.
3%.
3%?
No, I'm just kidding. How do I know that? What
2%.
percentage? 2%. What percentage of students in your area get into and maintain athletic conditioning versus those who don't?
All right, next part. Here in Podunk, Arkansas, not many. Like you said before, they all just want the secret techniques of ultimate power. You said that before.
Ultimate power?
Yeah.
Yeah, everyone wants those
Emperor
techniques.
Palpatine said
Yeah,
that.
Emperor Palpatine, yeah. Yeah, Emperor Palpatine, who is in fact Sifu Learning and is not in fact Sifu...
Hey.
All right, so, yes. Well, this is a good question because I've traveled around the U.S. and taught seminars, okay? I'm based here in New York City. And one thing I notice about New Yorkers, they don't mind the hard training. They don't mind training hard. And they like to be fit and stay in shape. Also, one thing I think a lot of people who have never been to New York before don't realize is how much New Yorkers walk. Ooh. It's not until I have visitors come from out of town, they're like, "Wow, you guys really walk around a lot."
There's a lot of New Yorkers that don't drive.
Yeah, well, because a lot of us don't have cars, right? And even if you take the train, well, you take the train there, and then you walk all around that area, and then you go there. Yeah. And so New Yorkers on the whole tend to be fit, all right? Not every New Yorker, but on the whole, New Yorkers tend to be fit. my school here, as I've talked about many times, is on the 4th floor. There's no elevator. So just by going up and down these stairs 2-3 times a week to
You
training.
got to make a decision to train.
Yeah, you're going to be in shape. Plus, you get here, you change. Oh, class is on the 5th floor tonight. You got to go up one more floor, right? So on some nights you got to do, and you got to huff it up there, right? So in general, I would say New Yorkers are pretty fitness-minded. New Yorkers walk a lot. New Yorkers do a lot of exercise. So it's never like pulling teeth to get my students to train hard. In fact, some of my Hong Kong instructors, my C-Box, have visited us from Hong Kong, and they're like, wow, your students train, really hard, and kind of complain that, in Hong Kong, people don't train that hard anymore and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, well, I don't know if that's actually true. I think in Hong Kong, maybe some traditional Sifus don't push their students the way that maybe we do. But I don't think Hong Kong people don't train hard because, one of the big things in Hong Kong right now is Thai boxing and MMA. And if you walk in any of those gyms, they are training hard. I think some of the very traditional Kung Fu Sifus, I think, are just a little behind on the times, right? But having said all that, I have taught outside of New York City in the U.S. And
a lot of ground floor.
I would say that there is sometimes a huge difference between teaching Wing Chun in New York City and teaching Wing Chun one state over. Okay?
Jersey.
No, I'm thinking the other way, Connecticut. When I first started teaching,
Connecticut.
When I first started teaching, I had a small branch in Connecticut. My parents lived out there at that time.
Yeah.
So I taught my parents had a huge basement. They let me teach out of their basement. So I taught a couple private students, hardcore types, because they had to seek me out. They went to the basement, right? Hardcore, right? And then eventually we moved to a dance studio. And then I taught there for a few years, but the New York school kept growing and growing and growing, and then it was harder and harder for me to spare 2 days to go to Connecticut when I got more and more students coming to New York, right?
Wow.
But that's
So you had both at this time.
Yeah, for like the first, let's say, 4 years of teaching, 4 or 5 years, I was like twice a week, I would take the train out to Connecticut and I would teach out there. But it wasn't that difficult for me to give up teaching in Connecticut, and I'll tell you why, all right? One, I already had a couple of senior students out there who were able to take it over for me anyway. So when I left there, I passed it on to a couple other people.
Okay.
But I lost my motivation to teach in Connecticut, and mind you, for our European friends, Connecticut is just the next state, all right?
Right.
By train, it's where I was teaching in Norwich, 1 hour away. So we're not talking about like going to another coast.
No.
Also not mentioning it's a black hole pit of despair.
Yes, but so in other words, it's not geographically so far away from New York that the difference should be that different, right? Like in terms of like how the
It's not a deal breaker.
I like to teach very systematically, right? So I teach according to a curriculum. On Monday, I would teach, okay, we're going to do swing defense, and then this thing in Chisao, and then this whatever kick defense or something like that, right? And then on Tuesday, for example, I would go to Connecticut, and I would teach the same exact lesson I taught in New York.
Okay.
All right? Now, when I taught in New York, the students were super motivated. They would train really hard. And then at the end, once we had done our sparring or whatever, all right, guys, go ahead and grab a kick shield. We're going to do 2 minutes of death, like a few rounds of 2 minutes of death, or we're going to do honey badger, all these exercises which are basically meant to just kill you at the end. These are what we call finishers, right? Yep. We used to call it crazy crackhead. But then to be more PC, we changed it to
honey
badger, right? And then, or like focus mid training or all these different exercises, right? That like, to basically power out the students at the end, punching, kicking, hardcore conditioning, up, down, steps, punches, heavy bag, all that kind of stuff, right? The New York students, after, at the end of class, all right, cool, they would go and they would do it, they'd be totally into it. I'd go to Connecticut, and like the energy level would be like,
Wow.
Because you have a lot of like Argyle sock wearing, like golf club playing people there who don't like to get their hands dirty. All right, and so I teach the same lesson, and everything's just kind of like, yeah, and they practice like really half-ass. And then I would be like, all right, guys, let's go grab some focus mitts. Oh, There'd be a collective sigh.
Collective
Literally.
sigh.
Yeah, so like I would teach the same lesson the night before.
What?
All right, guys, we're gonna do swing defense, and they were all the New York students.
On
They
it.
have like they're on it. They
Yeah.
want to do it. Go back and forth.
What?
The same lesson in Connecticut.
You gotta grab the focus mix.
And then so, not only was the New York school like really growing and building, and literally I needed more to focus more of my time there because I actually had a brick and mortar location as opposed to I was just teaching at a dance studio. But I think sometimes what instructors don't, or what students don't realize, is that the quality of lesson you get. I mean, look, a good instructor, a good coach is always going to deliver. That's their job. But if you are engaged and really into it, you only improve the quality of how that instructor or coach can deliver it. You know, that you could have the most motivated speaker in there.
Yeah.
But if the students are like, then I mean, like, you know, there's only so much you can do when you don't feel it coming back. But it wasn't like, had every time I taught the class, that was my reaction. I'd be like, okay, there's something wrong with the way I'm teaching. But then I would go back to New York, teach, and I was like, oh, Sifu, that was a great class. Da, da, da. Go to Connecticut. Right?
No.
And so like I've taught in other states.
Some
Let's
Twilight Zone.
say in more southern regions. And more southern region states give off the vibe of Connecticut. All right? So they
floor life.
like to have kung fu explained to them. But when it comes to like, you know, let's work it.
Interesting.
Right? So I have to say, you know, this guy's kind of being a bit self-deprecating, making fun of Podunk, Arkansas. But I have to say New York is really unique. Unique in that way that people here are really highly motivated. Because it's a hustle to survive in New York City.
Yeah.
Just to live here. It's so expensive. You're always competing with the best at whatever field you're in. You got only the best in New York. So it's a hustle to be, and you either embrace that grind or you got to get out.
Make it here, you make it anyway.
Yeah, and if you cannot embrace that grind, you move to Connecticut. All right? And so I feel that New York is kind of unique in that way. Plus, here at City Wing Chun, we got the Genius Gym. We literally have a fitness studio in the school that gets used regularly by our own students. So
I think you strategically picked the 4th floor to like weed out the lazy.
No, I didn't do that. That was literally all I can afford in terms of rent. Because in New York, when you're in a building that doesn't have an elevator, that's already one good sign that you might be able to afford it. But for every floor that you go up in a building that doesn't have an elevator, the rent drops. They drop the pants on them.
Exponentially.
Yeah.
I love it.
You don't even want to know one floor down. Even one floor down from us, like the tattoo parlor, I'm sure their rent is way, way, way higher than our 4th floor. So, yeah.
Here is higher than upstairs.
Yeah. And the upstairs is bigger and it's cheaper just because one more floor up.
Wow. All right, let's move right along to Daniel Barrier. Hey, what's up? Do you have any stories about the...
Wait a minute. He says he's from France. That's got to be Barrier.
Oh.
You got to Perrier that, all right? All right? It's not Daniel Barrier.
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 All right? The R is silent.
It would be Daniel.
Daniel Barrier.
All right, let's go.
Hey, what's up?
So,
do you have any stories about the infamous fight between William Chung and Emin Bostepi? Thanks for your work, Daniel Barrier from Marseille, France.
Marseille.
Marseille.
You know, I thought like we were going to cut that out there, but I'm like, no, I want to see him read that. I want to hear him read that.
Marseille, France.
Marseille, France. Yeah, making fun of Podunk, Arkansas. Meanwhile, I like that Perrier water.
Perrier. Let me get that Perrier.
So, Daniel's question here.
Mm-hmm. Daniel.
I get this question 8 times in the comments every time I ask, okay? Everyone always wants me to talk about the Emin Bostepi William Chung fight, okay? And everyone always wants to ask me what my opinion on Emin Bostepi. I mean, literally, I get this question. What do you think about Emin Bostepi? What about the William Chung Emin Bostepi fight? So, first of all, Sifu Amin is like a titan of the Wing Chun, of WT, all right? And not just because of the fight with William Cheung, but, of all the people from the European section, he's, was one of the most formidable and definitely had a presence and a name within kind of the whole Wing Chun world,
reputation before that.
But I think what people don't realize sometimes is since I started teaching Wing Chun, I've had nothing to do with him. So I learned, in 2002 when I started teaching, the U.S. section was directly under Sifu Amin. So for my entire teaching career, he's had zero influence on anything that I ever had to do, right? But because we have a lot of European-centric viewers, he's still like a very prominent thing over there, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's hard for people to realize that you can teach Wing Chun for 20 years and Sifu Amin is not a major topic of conversation, right? Because I got kung fu shit to do, man. I don't have time to talk about other people, right? Before that time, I had learned from Sifu Amin in a few seminars. I think I'd gone to maybe 6 or 8 seminars with him.
Okay.
So I'd seen him and
before you got to the castle.
Before and also while I was in Germany, I went to 1 or 2 Sifu Amin seminars in Germany, which was around the time shortly before he left. And then after that, he kind of had nothing to do with anything, right? So I never had to deal with him in terms of running a school, so I don't have anything to say about him on like the business end of things. I never had to learn advanced program from him, so I have nothing to say about that, right? Sifu Amin was a huge inspiration for me when I was a beginning student and when I was learning.
Okay.
And later, of course, when I had the chance to learn from Sifu Amin and Sifu Carson Lau, my view on Wing Chun changed dramatically. But that is not... See, the problem is when I say that, people go like, oh, so you don't think Sifu Amin is good. It's not what I said, right? People have a really hard time understanding when you just try to say something in a non-judgmental, without any value judgment kind of way. When I started learning, he was a huge inspiration. I watched his videos. I went to his seminars. I emulated a lot of the things that he did. And over time, as my contact grew less and less with learning from him or people who learned from him, well, naturally, I was more influenced by the people I was learning from. So that I need to say that because people will read into what I just said in any way they want to see it, right?
Gotcha.
It's not a slight on his. It's like I just kind of, his influence and his presence in my Wing Chun world drifted away until it wasn't there anymore, and it hasn't been there for nearly 20 years, okay?
Gotcha.
So now when people ask me this stuff, the only thing I can tell people is what I've maybe read about him in the meantime. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, I'd be rehashing stories from the 90s, which everyone else knows, and there's people who knew him way back. I mean, I wasn't close to him or anything like that. There are people who know him way better that can tell these stories. And why would I want to reopen the gaping wound of Emin Bostepe versus William Cheung, which happened in 1986? You know how many times people ask me about it? In 1986, that was probably the year I was hiding in the tree as a ninja where that neighbor saw me, all right? So my mind wasn't about this. The problem is, because I do WT, you inherit the sins of your forefathers, and I have to answer for stuff that I had nothing to do with,
All the sins.
Of course. I know, people know because, I know why people ask me this. Because I can tell old stories about Sifu Amin, about the EWTO, stuff that people haven't heard before, and I tell this stuff routinely on the podcast. So I know people know that I know a story about this, and I'll tell you something. I do
a backstory of the story.
I know lots of backstories about the whole William Cheung versus Amin thing and how that was set up and what happened. All that, I know all that stuff. Mm-hmm. All right, but I ain't gonna say it.
Yes. I got a question about this shirt you got on because it's very reminiscent of the shirts that Bruce Lee was wearing in Big Boss.
Big Boss, yes. So this is actually the same exact shirt. Well, not the one that he himself wore, because I probably ripped through that thing like the Incredible Hulk, right? This is basically a Chinese undershirt, and Bruce Lee was, he was a fashion icon, sometimes for better and sometimes for worse. Right, he had a couple questionable choices and things that he wore, but in Big Boss, he basically created the style of wearing the undershirt as outerwear, because normally you never wore
That
like
wasn't a thing
Chinese
yet.
gentlemen did not wear these as outerwear. They wore it under their jacket or under something else. And he was the first one to do it. Now the company's called Lei Gongman.
Lei Gongman.
Lei Gongman has a bunch of affiliates throughout Hong Kong, and all they sell are undergarments. All right, and the two shirts they make for men, the undergarment, they only have two styles. But in Big Boss, he wore two of these Lei Gongman shirts. One was a long sleeve one, and the other one was the short sleeve one. All right. But it was from the company, and I got the tag here. Lei Gongman, it's actually the same one, and they have never changed the design. It's the same design. These are the most comfortable undershirts you can get. They're super breathable, and they have two styles. They have the arms with the cuffs and the ones without. I got the ones with the cuffs because that's what Bruce Lee had in Big Boss.
Yo, we gotta go back to Hong Kong.
I'm not gonna get the one without cuffs. And then they have the long sleeve one, which I didn't get. Right. So this is the same exact design. It's so comfortable. The shirts are like they're just so nice to wear. They're a little on the pricey side, actually, because Lei Gongman knows that people like them now.
$100 for
yeah,
a
when I go to
t-shirt.
Hong Kong, and like I told Mak Sifu, I'm going to go get a Lei Gongman. He goes, I know where you can get an imitation one for way cheaper. I'm like, I don't want an imitation one.
No.
I want the one with the tag.
Yeah.
So this is the actual Lei Gongman that Bruce Lee wore in Big Boss.
All right. We got... I want to ask you another question since I'm here.
You are here, which is rare.
Yeah.
What people don't realize is normally we record you separately, and then we record mine, and then we just paste everything together.
Dude, there's a video of I don't know, this dude's taking a video of somebody, but when I first saw it, it looks like a kid just comes up to him and decks him in the jaw and runs.
Oh, you're talking
Right?
about Hezbollah,
And
the
this-
little Khabib.
I didn't
Yes.
know that. I thought it was a little kid,
Yeah.
but
No,
going into the rabbit hole.
I believe he's a dwarf. Yeah, he's like 19 years old. Yeah.
yeah, it's like a big rivalry going on with him and another dude.
Oh yeah, with Abdul Razik. Abdul
Yes.
Razik. Yeah. And there was that video went viral where they had the like faux press
Recently.
conference. Yeah.
Yes.
Dude,
What's up with these
whole
dudes?
story is crazy,
Is this
man.
going to happen? This fight or what?
Well, supposedly, I don't know, the two of them have some beef and, started in Instagram or something like that. Hezbollah likes to go around and like, start shit on Instagram and like supposedly he has some training with I believe he's from
Hezbollah got
Dagestan.
training.
He's from Dagestan like Khabib Nurmagomedov. And the other
That's his boy.
Yeah, Abdul Razik, he's from Tajikistan. So when you actually see that press
Wow.
conference, they're not actually even speaking the same language. Because I believe Hezbollah is speaking Russian, right? And then the Abdul Razik's from
translators,
Tajikistan,
yeah.
right? So he has like an earpiece. That's why there's a little bit of a delay. But the two of them, they don't like it. It's weird because they do want them to fight.
Yeah.
I mean, we watch these things. It's a guilty pleasure because it's like,
It's pure entertainment.
the press conference is pure entertainment.
Yeah.
I really hope that they don't fight. I'm worried.
Oh
like,
no, you're on that side of the fence.
I don't know. I think they can get hurt. You know what I mean? And I think it's not a good thing. This whole thing about like amateurs fighting, like even with this Jake Paul stuff, like
I was going to ask you about
yeah,
that too.
I'm not a big fan of that because I feel I get it. It makes money. They know what they're doing in terms of getting people to buy into it. But I think that it also cheapens the sport a little bit. And
Even if your man's retired, still
I
coming
don't
back out of retirement,
I don't
whatever.
know. I don't know. I see. I'm the guy that
They're not even same weight class. Am I bugging?
Are you talking about the
Logan.
two dudes? Oh, yeah. That I don't know about that. I don't know about that. Yeah, I haven't been following that too much because
Okay.
it just came too quickly on the heels of the Ben Askren fight, and I'm like, I don't really care about this stuff anymore. Yeah, because I'm the guy like when I'm 43.
Yeah.
And there's a select handful of UFC fighters, especially in the heavier weight classes, that are my age that are still fighting, but at my age they're like pretty much done, right? Like I'm at the highest end of
rough to
oldest
watch.
for a fighter. And whenever I'm watching a UFC and you just see some old man getting his ass kicked, that breaks my heart. Because I feel that once all fighters have an expiration date. Sometimes it's a little gradual, sometimes it's quick. But I think once that happens, you need to stop fighting. Because literally all you're doing is volunteering for brain damage and who knows what else, right? So I'm always up, like, Anderson Silva for me fought way too many years past when he should have stopped a long time ago. So I hate it when people who should not be fighting are fighting. And I don't like to see amateurs who go in the ring for some kind of gimmick and they could potentially get really hurt. So I'm not a huge fan.
Jake Paul.
Except when it's Jake Paul. Like Logan Paul, right? Which one is it? I can't tell.
Paul.
Jake
They're
Paul,
brothers.
right? You know the thing that bothers me is that Jake Paul is making me root for Floyd Mayweather.
That's why I wanted to ask him this question.
Yeah.
I agree 100%.
Yeah, not a Mayweather fan. Look, you can't deny the skills. Still not a Mayweather fan.
Yeah.
He's making me root for Mayweather.
Right.
I'm also upset that we're actually having this conversation where Jake Paul is actually living rent-free in my head.
Yes,
Like,
yes,
if
for sure.
Everyone could just ignore him. None of this would make a difference.
Exactly,
and we wouldn't
exactly.
have this conversation.
Exactly.
Jake Paul. Fuck that
All right.
guy. So, excuse my
We got a few more minutes left, I think.
Yep.
I want to go over the latest. Crime Faces.
Yes.
We love shouting out Crime Faces.
Yes.
But they have an alternate page that Crime Faces, what it used to be, has went to the alternate page, and now
Really?
because
Why?
they had
Why?
to
Did they have some problem?
They must have
They would have videos taken down. Those people can report
so
that
they,
stuff.
they brought out the alternate. And the alternate, the latest one, is this female security guard destroying people.
Really?
She's throwing out a crew.
Wow.
And I want this woman on my team down at Ulan because, Sifu, she does a lapta.
Really?
She's throwing out some dude, and dude is like getting out, and she kicks him in the ass on the way out. And as she's kicking him, some chick on the side, on the left, tries to hit her, and she catches her, and then she catches him with the lapta, got the girl crying, and she goes outside and kicks some more ass.
No kidding.
Oh, it's a good
I
one.
want to marry this woman. Oh my God.
You gotta see it.
Mikey wants to marry her.
She's fire.
Wow, that's crazy.
Fire.
That's crazy.
And you have to see if you haven't seen it yet. All right, from Fernando Nunez, what do you think is the origin of the Wing Chun system? I heard a theory that the WT came from a system of double knives like the Bat Jam Do.
Yeah, so this is a prevalent theory that's been pushed by a lot of my European Wing Chun brethren that, it's that whole chicken or the egg, which one came first kind of thing, right? And I believe because for the longest time, the weapons are always regarded as like top secret in Wing Chun, right? Like not all of Grandmaster Yip Man's students learn the weapons, and maybe some people learned some of it, or maybe they didn't learn all of it, or they learned one or not the other. They didn't learn any, and then they made stuff up, or they copied from this person or whatever. So the weapon's kind of like a mess, right? And in the in Sifu Amin's system, for many years, only a privileged few had the chance to learn the weapons. And for his European organization, especially in Western Europe, it would be a very long time before you learn the weapons. Now, they've since totally changed that. Because to a certain degree, the EWTO has changed their view about classical Wing Chun because they kind of they've developed themselves in a different direction. So it no longer takes you like a really long time to learn things like the pole or the knives or whatever. But there was a time period where that was like,
Coveted.
that was coveted stuff on the top shelf that you're never going to see. And now it's not that way anymore. But because it was so far away for so long, that's where rumors started to get, people create rumors about stuff that they don't know. You know what I mean?
All these rumors.
Yeah, well, think about it, right? There's one creepy house on the corner. Somebody you don't know that person. Every time you walk by, it's a guy with an eye going, like this,
your
and he goes
block
in.
in Connecticut.
Yeah. That's always the house that all the neighborhood kids have rumors about. Yo, man, I heard he's got bodies in the basement.
Oh, man, faggoty.
Yeah. I heard that man beats cats with newspapers, right? Because it's always like, there's always like one weird thing.
Beats cat.
Yeah. There's always one weird house on the block where the person who lives there is very secretive and doesn't talk a lot. Mm-hmm. All right? You don't know what's going on. But that's all the rumors come out about that place, right? So for me, it's kind of like the knives, all right? The knives are like, they're hanging out. They're that weird house in the neighborhood. You want to know what's going on in there. You don't know. So what do people do? They make shit up, all right?
Epic.
So this whole connection between like the fist fighting and the weapons was, I want to say, overstated, all right? The long pole, obviously, we have applications to fist fighting, but it's more on the physical end, making yourself stronger stance, grip strength, all that kind of stuff. But there were some European Sifus who actually created fist fighting applications of the long pole, like crazy, where they would actually use the arrow punch where you drop in. But instead of that being a developmental exercise for long pole, which it is, they would put that into the fist fighting and say, see, these are the fist fighting applications, right? Or they would drop into a horse stance and do a shin lock, which is actually a normal part of advanced footwork. And they say, see, that's long pole. Or they hit with an open hand and say, oh, see, this is actually the knife technique done with an open hand, right? Now, there is some of that transference over there, but it's a little bit. The way the knife changes how you move gives you a different quality of how you apply Wing Chun. It doesn't give you specific techniques, okay? And according to Grandmaster Yip Man in New Martial Hero, the knife techniques are derived from the fist fighting technique. So people always speculate this. The old man literally said himself in New Martial Hero magazine that the knife techniques are derived from the fist fighting techniques.
On
paper. That at least as far as Grandmaster Yip Man is concerned, that question has been answered. Okay? The whole thing that like, oh, actually, because WT is so aggressive because it's really a knife system masquerading as a fist fighting art. This is a pleasant sounding trope from people who probably didn't learn the knives.
Okay.
And that's all I got to say about
Well,
that.
if you haven't, if you don't know anything about the New Martial Hero episode, go check that out. It's
Yeah,
from like a year ago.
Yeah, I did a brief recap on that on one of the old...
Translation.
I'll put a link for that in the description.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right. I think that's what we have time for.
That's all we
today.
got time for. All right, peeps. So I hope you guys like our formalized format of the way we do our episodes now. In order to keep these going, we need questions. We need topics. So go ahead and comment below. Type questions. What do you want me to talk about? Try not to ask me about Sifu Amin again, please. Anything else, okay, except baking recipes, whatever, kung fu stuff, write it in the comments, and I'll see you guys next time.
Word is I'm a kung fu genius. Technique speaks for me, not lineage. Forget Jet Li, cause I'm the one. Many call me Sifu, but to you I'm Si-Gung. And I produce masters. You surpassed us. Your kung fu stiffer than corpse and caskets. City Wing Chun is the house I built. Violate the gate and your blood gets spilt. Alex Richter, always the...
So this is KFG 20.
Wow.
And so it took us 19 episodes to figure out our format.
All right, peeps. On today's episode...
Excellent. That was brilliant.
Good, great, finally.
All right, peeps. On today's episode of the Kung Fu Genius, the genius will be taking viewer questions and cause ruckus.
And cause a ruckus.
Lots of gems, lots of Podunk, Arkansas, and lots of... Man!
He said Podunk, Arkansas.
Podunk. Lots of, hey man, how long you been practicing the pure chat Bachim do? Bachim Sao? Hey man. All right, peeps, on today, the AK, somebody pull out the AK. Have you learned the Bachim Sao? Have you learned the Bachim Do Sao?
And every day, I practice martial arts.
Watch out.